Welcome to OAC Vancouver's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We believe that Jesus is needed and relevant for people in Vancouver today. The message of God's love and promise of wholeness was destined to be experienced within a faith community that worships, studies scripture, and prays together. We warmly welcome you to journey with us towards greater connection, purpose, and peace. We'll be sharing our recorded services and conversations with health and wellness experts. Enjoy.
One of the things I realized in coming to the hospice is I've never been to one. So what is this going to be like? Being surrounded by people who are suffering, people who are learning from their cancer, people who are wondering what the next step will be, families that can't imagine life without their loved ones, people my age struggling with brain cancer. Kind of this, okay, how do I rationalize? How do I theorize? How do I think on these things? What do I see in the difference of the patients that go towards death with openness, with celebration even, or those that suffer even further and hold it in and hold on to things? And where do I find a difference in understanding in that? And it came to me in a realization with amazing staff. I worked with amazing doctors, nurses, caretakers. And it came through these conversations, through these observations, that we live in a death-denying culture, don't we? We push death out of the way. We try to find ways of understanding that, well, I could prolong it. I'm a vegetarian, therefore I'll live longer. I run every day, so therefore. And I noticed that not against quality of life and health, but this kind of formula we place where I'm entitled to a good life because. And I realized on this train of thought that that's kind of where some of the suffering comes from. I lived a good life. How dare I have cancer? My father passed away when I was in grade 11. Strict vegetarian his whole life. Was in the Acronaires, fit, played hockey all the time. And he died of liver cancer. So there seems to be no rhyme or reason to this, and yet we try to poke at these attempts. We all agree that one day we won't be here. And yet there's some kind of entitlement, there's some kind of thing there that I've been trying to understand, that we try to push it off. And I think that attempt, that entitlement, causes anxiety, causes suffering. And as a result, we even try to manipulate, try to control God's hope. When you think of death, you often put in your mind, okay, an elderly person lying in bed, sleep. Right? We have these images, and I had them too. So when I came into a hospice setting, I was quite shocked and surprised that rarely happens. Dying is hard work. People get restless, get annoyed, get angry as one of the last stages before they pass away. There's movement of the soul. There's some kind of energy. There's something happening there that is not always well known about. A lot of my work actually involved in supporting families and guiding them through the process and helping them realize that this is what happens. That your loved one will have slow breathing. They will have delusions. But we can provide care. We can provide comfort. Because we face death with this kind of individualistic achievement. We kind of have stories around us that we're entitled to 90-ish years of suffering, of suffer-free existence. I mean, in Canada, we are one of the longest living countries in general. But it's something that brings it into deeper, that we want to push it. And that's the part that I've noticed, that as I've served, I realized that I think that's the entitlement that I want to speak to. Because like I said, I've served people my age. Right across the hospice in Abbotsford is the children's hospice. So within the proximity of my work, there's children with cancer. And trying to sort out this heaviness of, okay, what do I do with this? I'm not used to this. I'm not used to coming into work, looking at a list of patients and realizing the ones that their names are no longer there. I'm not used to being the last person this patient has ever spoken to. I'm not used to conversations where this may be the only time I get to speak to you. And it's in this kind of denial that I've realized causes a lot of our angst. I had one patient share her love of nature. And this nature comes up a lot in these conversations, and she specifically referenced the circle of life. She loves the circle of life. And so I asked, I'm like, well, how do you see yourself in the circle of life? And she paused, and she realized she didn't even know. And so we understand this circle of life, whether it's Lion King or, BBC World Planet, but we're distanced from it. We move away from it for various reasons, and that's what I've been trying to understand and think through. So our scripture today was kind of like the big idea, the point to remember in Psalms, to teach us to number our days that we may gain wisdom, a heart of wisdom. Well, what does that mean? It's kind of counterintuitive to be like, yeah, I'm going to die. But yet, the scripture is saying there is something to be wise about. There's something there to be understood. So I want to start broadly and focus in, which is a teaching methods, teacher me coming out. In the Bible, our English Bibles, it's quite interesting that the word death appears more than disciples. It appears more than the word salvation, than the words of forgiveness and redemption. So the Bible has this as a core theme. It's there. And it kind of uses death in three main ways. It uses it kind of in a metaphorical way. So we talk about spiritual death, or if anyone's ever said to somebody, you're dead to me, right? They're not literally dead, but in a way, there's a death of relationship, there's a death of spirit, there's a death of meaning. It also speaks of death as a condition, more towards this idea of renewal and, when God comes again and restores. But then, of course, there's the physical death. And that's the one I've been trying to narrow in and understand, because I think it's the most scary one. It's the one that we always have. We can feel good about, I'm alive within inside me. It's a great spirit, great energy. We, as Adventists, we really like talking about end times. That's one of our heritage points. So what happens when we bring it back to the physical? So the day that you'll breathe your last, without rhyme or reason. Vegetarians getting liver cancer, children dying before their youthful time. We are from Abbotsford, and just the other day, there was a massive car crash on the Highway 1 because there was a random ladder, and a mom and one of her sons died. Right? No rhyme or reason, no formula that can bring a mindful, thoughtful, intellectual justification. And we sang those songs today to give up that. And I think that's very, very key. And it's interesting what fear does. Fear is a very powerful motivator. How many of us have been motivated to do something because we're fearful of our boss, of a conversation we may not like? I got some hands, yeah. Any Star Wars fans? Fear is like the core theme of the entire Star Wars movies, right? Fear of not having something, fear of letting go. Some theologians actually position that the power of sin isn't death. The power of sin is fear of death. And I've been thinking about that lately. How do we act out of our ways? How do we act out of our character? How do we act out of Christ-like intentions based on fear? Some of you might be old enough that you grew up fearing the Soviet Union. Some of us are fearful of certain political ideas. Some people are fearful, and the list goes on and on. So then, what is Christianity's answer to the fear of death? And I think that's when we have to really turn to a part of the Christ's example that we sometimes miss. We acknowledge that Jesus was fully God and fully human, and yet sometimes our conversations lean on the more divinity side, and we forget that Jesus was human. So when we look at Jesus' death in a human term, we notice something. First of all, that he did die. Jesus did die. His image, when we sing songs, be like Jesus, do we remember that to be like Jesus means to die? Physically? Because sometimes we circumvent, we push that all to, the baptism, to die to self. And those are beautiful and grateful things. But I've noticed in my journey and in my time in Christian communities, we use that to shadow over the reality that we physically die and that Jesus did. And like I said, when we try to take control of fear, when we try to operate through it, we reduce hope. We try to possess it. I've heard many people say, Jesus will come in my lifetime. And I always wince because I'm like, well, if he doesn't? Have you set yourself up for suffering? Are you afraid of death so now you're convinced Jesus will come and you won't have to die? And so when we understand and restore our understanding of death, when we remember it, there's an interesting linkage there. It links to restoring hope, to let go of hope, as in, I don't control it. I don't possess it. It's a gift. And so when we restore death, we restore hope. Jesus restored these things because not only did he die, he showed us that our life is not ended by death. Though death is part of it, it is not ended by it. And all of a sudden, hope, this salvation, this overcoming becomes alive. Because I've removed the fear of this moment. I'm not afraid to face death. I'm not surprised by it. I'm not shocked by it because Jesus did it. He overcame it. And this is what I really notice is how easy it is to place our hope in false things. As Adventists, we have a bit of this in our heritage, unfortunately, with I'm vegan, therefore. I grew up around a lot of militant vegans, and I'm not against it, but I saw what it did to their thinking, the entitlement. I'm Adventist, therefore, or I'm Baptist, therefore. Like, search yourself and what entitlements do you own or try to possess? Have you tried to control hope because of your therefore statements? I'm a good person, therefore I don't deserve to die. Well, the Bible is very clear. Good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to good people. This is a bridge that we often deny. And I love the theme, the series on bridges, because this is a bridge that we know of, that we have, but we deny it because we don't know what's on the other side. Imagine going over a bridge and the other half is foggy. It's kind of scary because is the traffic going to be all right? Where is it going to land? How far is it? And that's what death has. That's what death is, but we know what's on the other side. Jesus removed the fog, but he didn't take away the bridge, the crossing, this next part. Jesus enlarged human life to include death, not to be ended by it. I think that's a very important clarification and hope. That our hope extends beyond death, but doesn't remove it. I wonder how often we've shortened or undermined hope because, we prayed for years that my dad would be free of cancer, and he lost that battle. Do I then deny hope that, God didn't care? See, I'm trying to help clarify in my own way of this, being in a hospice as well, of do I possess hope? Do I try to control it? To match and to overcome my fear. And I think that's a misusage. I love this quote by Elizabeth Elliot. She was a very well-known missionary. Fear also arises when we think everything depends on us. Fear is not just necessarily the unknown, but fear is, it's up to me. There's panic. I don't have all the answers to death, therefore, and we start to crumple up. And I've had patients like that, where they didn't have the answer, and therefore the suffering, the internal strife came about. And I love the music today, because the music we sung, the reality we just worship to, shows that we have to sacrifice our knowledge. Knowledge is not the most full way to Christ. You can't know your way to the unknowable God. We talk about God in these, the eternal, the infinite, and then we take the next step and say, yep, I'm going to know all about it. Like, can you? And I'm not anti-knowledge. I'm working on a second master's degree. But I am clarifying that there's something more to our relatedness with God than knowing. And that's hard. Because again, part of our Adventist heritage is knowing. And so can we sacrifice that? Can we lay it at the altar just like we sung? Can we admit that we have some ideas of what may happen after death? The Bible gives some clues, but ultimately we don't know. And am I secure enough to understand that not knowing is okay? Or do I need to know something which is unknowable? Do you see the paradox there? But it's that cycle, that suffering cycle that I've seen. And so when we remove our formulas, when we enter, just like we sang, giving it up, I think we take power away from evil. I think when we acknowledge our fear, understand to give it up, that it's okay not to know, that our relationship to God is not solely knowledge-based, I think we reclaim our son and daughtership of God. I think we reclaim the hope in its fullest sense. And this is one of the big differences I've seen with my patients. Those that have blatantly said, I don't know what's happening next, Kevin, but that's okay. And they enter into a reality that they don't have to worry about their stage 4 cancer. In fact, there's still life and things to learn in that way. They become grateful. I've had patients who are excited about their cancer diagnosis. I had one gentleman who spent most of his life smoking. Very angry, kind of stereotypical trucker guy. Got lung cancer. Instantly stopped smoking. And it was from that moment he realized the control cigarettes had on him. The mad and angry person he really was. And I got to meet with him many times, and each time he's like, Kevin, I'm so grateful for my cancer. It has taught me to be a better person. He removed his fear. He knew God had him. He knew that things happen. People get cancer. He knew that this was part of the circle of life, and so he could celebrate the moments within that. He could celebrate that he had learned something from this disease. And I was in shock. I told him many times, I'm like, I think I'm learning from you. You're supporting me in this moment. Because it can be easy. I don't have cancer. I'm relatively healthy. Can't do too many push-ups, but I can swim over a kilometer. So do I enter into these conversations fear-based based on my experience, or do I allow what Christ has said, what the Bible speaks to, that death is part of us? And Jesus may come tomorrow, he may not. But do we view death as something that is fearful, even though Christ has overcome it? Do we view it as something apart from our life? Old people, yeah, they can do it. But not me. See, this is why I want to try to remember and re-remember and clarify death, because it clarifies hope. And when we have these clarifications, we can celebrate in the midst of cancer. I had another patient, when she realized that her life still had meaning despite her diagnosis, she said, Kevin, I'm still here. I still have value. I was like, yeah, you do, girl. Go for it. I love that. You have value amongst the pain. You have value. Death does not have the final say. But we give it that when we put fear in the way, don't we? And so part of this clarification is about reclaiming what God has given us. A gift. We can't possess our own gift. We didn't earn it, but we have it. Now, I want to be honest and truthful to the reality that this is hard. I can stand up here and talk all these things. I can relay my experiences. But the reality is that the world is hard. Death is hard. Losing people we love is hard. I want to acknowledge that we live in a bit of I call it a tension, a space of, well, almost not quite there yet. God revealed himself. He gave us hope, but it's not fully here. We acknowledge that the fullness of justice, the fullness of grace, the fullness of these things will come when Jesus returns. So it's not fully here yet. Kind of partially. We're kind of in this moment of, okay, well, we have a bit, God came, he revealed part of himself. He showed us what grace kind of looks like, but it's not here yet. And it's in that tension, it's in that hard space that we're called to operate, to recognize that we have salvation, but people are still dying. God will restore justice. But right now, the wealthy, the rich, we prayed for the leaders, their operation sometimes comes at the cost of others. So we have this almost, but they're not, kind of, sort of ish. And it's a hard space to be in. And I want to acknowledge that. I don't want to overlook it and gloss it over. I do not have all the answers. I just have the questions and the tension. That's one of the things I love about the series being on bridges. Because bridges fully work when they're under tension. Right? My wife and I crossed one today from Abbotsford. Its shape, its form, its ability to work comes from being under tension. If you ever watch a video on the construction of a bridge, when they first set it up, it's wavy, it looks unstable, you want nothing to do with it. And then they tighten the cables. They put the counterweights in. And all of a sudden, it's straight. All of a sudden, it can support. And all of a sudden, it's functional. So yes, it is hard. There is tension. But we have an ultimate hope. And with that hope, we've clarified that there needs to be no fear. We can walk into the reality of death. We can operate in the reality of death, acknowledging, honoring, crying with the people, celebrating what lung cancer has taught people. We can be in the moment, in the space between us. But we also acknowledge that as a caterpillar turns to a butterfly. We use butterflies a lot in hospice, this transformation that the caterpillar died, turned to a pile of this kind of gloop stuff, and then emerges. We acknowledge that, how many of you have ever gotten sunburned? I'm a white guy, so I get it all the time, and that is cell death that is there to save me. These skin cells are damaged, so they die off, so they are no longer clinging to me. So death always is giving way to life around us. We operate with it all the time. And so it is part of the theme. It is part of what God has brought. Every 7 years is a new, completely version of you. All those cells have died and passed away, and you have a brand new billion set cells of you. So I hope that our time this morning has been uplifting. Like I said, we live in a culture that denies death. And so when I told people, yeah, I'm going to preach on death, they're like, oh, okay. And I think that's part of the reality that we need to understand and work through and claim as Christians, as people that follow the example of Jesus. To remember that we do die, that it is not a shocking phenomenon, but it's not the end. I heard one amen, so I'll go with that. It's not the end, but it's not removed from our journey either. To restore hope is something that we're not entitled to. We didn't earn it. Our actions don't qualify it. It's something that we cannot think our way to. Again, I'm not against quality of health, but I am against those what-ifs, those therefore statements, the formulas that turn hope into a possession. It's mine. And what we get when we understand, when we let go of the fear, because we've claimed onto the hope in the full sense of as a gift of a God who died, a God who's showed us that full humanity was seen after his death. Like I said, we often focus on Jesus' divinity, but he was also fully human. So we know that after he died, after he rose, that was full humanity. This was a point brought out to me by one of the doctors I work with. His 30-some years of medical practice, now he's in hospice care, and what he's tried to wrestle with. And much of what I've shared comes from his work, his book as well. To meet the needs of others in that tension of, I can laugh and I can provide joy. I can be here with you because I know that in the moment it sucks, but that we have eternal hope that life has been enlarged beyond death, but still includes it. So I hope that as you may come to live in the reality of life among death, the reality that hope overcomes death, but we still have it. May you see that life is bigger, but not removed from it. And may you find the wisdom that this Psalm is trying to show us. That with embracing death, simply because it's part of the process by which we ultimately attain full humanity. That these things will not be scary, will not be a shock, but will be part of who we are. So that we may relate, we may embrace, and we may be the community that sees the bigness of life and celebrates and honors it. Because to me, that is the beauty of church. That is what we're called to be. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to OAC Vancouver's podcast. Learn more at oacvancouver.ca. If you're in Vancouver, join us for worship Saturdays at 11 a.m. at 5350 Bailey Street. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. God bless you and have a wonderful day.